Good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Dalid of Masechet Menachot. We are at the bottom of Mem Gimel and Mebet. We are in on the second of the widest lines, in the middle of the line. We had just taught one teaching by Rabbi Meir in connection with tzitzit, and now we teach two additional brisas that share again with the same opening of Haya Rabbi Omer. Haya Rebbe Meir Omer, the same opening. We're going to teach two more that along the same lines, although they do not relate to tzitzit. So let's take a look. So again, second of the widest lines, middle of the line on Mem Gimel and Mem Tanya, Haya Rebbe Meir Omer. A person is obligated to make 100 blessings every day. Shnei Amar. V'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach. That and now Israel, what does God ask of you? Now, a couple of different ways that we can somehow get from this statement to 100. So let's take a look. Rashi offers one, and then we'll give another. So ma Hashem Elokecha v'gomer kari meya. So don't say, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach, what does God want from you? But rather, 100 me'ah is what Hashem wants from you. So namely, 100 blessings is what Hashem wants from you. Take a look at Tosos, last Tosos on the daf, shoel mimach, Perish Rabbeinu Tam, Dahavi Malay. And specifically, the Shita Mekubetza says that the word shoel is Malay, that in fact, although if you take a look at the pasuk at the bottom, it's not malay. It's written without the vav. If you include the vav, v'yesh meya otiyot pasuk. If you have the vav of shoel included, then that pasuk. V'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimakim liyirayas Hashem Elokecha lelechas b'chol derachav v'lavayas v'lavaoso v'lavod es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha. Again, that's a Dvarim Perik Yud Pasuk Yud Bet. That pasuk, if you count the extra vav, that if you write that shoel in Malay form, well then you end up with 100. The Yesh Mefarshim, and Tosos continues, so that's a second way that you can get to 100 is looking at the number of letters in the pasuk. The Yesh Mefarshim Dema Ole Ba'atbash Meya. If you take a look at the word ma and then you convert each of the letters using the atbash translation. So aleph is equal to the tuf and the bet is equal to the shin. So the mem would be equal to a yud, that's 10. And the hey is equal to a tzadi, that's 90. 90 plus 10, of course, is 100. So v'yesh mefarshim demav ola ba'atbash meya u'bekuntras perish al tikrama elameya. And again, clarifying exactly what Rashi means, don't read it as ma, but as meya. Kolomer shechayev kuf brachot, that you're subject to 100 blessings. V'yesh mefarshim kedei lahashlim meya ba'otioteha. But you could also say, you know what? If you add that aleph, then not only is it the word me'ah going to mean 100, but even if you keep it as the word ma, but put an aleph in it just to make it Malay, well, then you again come to 100 letters. And when you change it to 100, well, it's a nice parallel. When you change the word ma to me'ah, which means 100, not only do you make the word worth 100, but you make the pasuk have 100 letters. So, okay, so now we've confirmed that we have this need for 100 brachot. Rav Chia breidu Rav Avya b'shabto v'yomi taveh tarach umumali lahu b'isparmekei umagde. That when then there was Yontif and Shabbos, well, on those days you have many fewer brachot because the Shmona Esrei, instead of having 19 brachot, would only have 7, for Rosh Hashanah it'll have 9. But the bottom line is that fewer brachot. And so as a result, even if you include the Musaf bracha, so now 7 times 4 is 28, that is still way less than 19 times 3, which is 57. And so what would he do in order to get to 100? He would make sure to have blessings over various spices and wonderful food, delicious food. Megade. Okay, so Tanya, another brisa, Haya Reb Meir Omer, Chayav Adam Levarek Shalosh Brachot B'chol Yom. There are three specific blessings that one should make every day. Eluhain, and here are they. Sha'asa'ani Yisrael, that you made me a Jew. Shalo asa'ani Isha, that you did not make me a woman. And Shalo asa'ani Bor, and you did not make me a boar. Now, this last one is going to get somebody upset, and we're going to end up changing it. Of course, this is not, in fact, what we do. We make it Shalo asani goy, shalo asani isha, shalo asani eved, or shalo asani eved, shalo asani isha. So, but let's take a look. So, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Sham'ei Librei Dahava Kamivarach Shalo asani bor. So, Rav Acha heard his son saying the blessing about a boar. Amrlei, he said to him, Kule hai nami. One second, why are you doing so far? And Rashi helps us understand what does that mean, why you're doing so far. That you're blessing yourself, that you're not an ignoramus, a person who's a base person. Or Lashakrina, Kule Hai Nami Bishlama Ovid Kochavim. I understand why you would, or alternatively, you're going so far, meaning I understand that you would not want to be an Ovei Kochavim, the Isha, or a woman, Hoavalo, B'nai Mitzvah Ninu, because they have a fewer number of mitzvot than a man does, because of the concept of mitzvah saseh shazman grama. Shapir, Mivarechet, that makes sense. Elabur, Bar Mitzvahu. The same, he's subject to the same mitzvahs that you are. So why should you want to treat that person any less? So either it's because again, you're praising yourself about your knowledge, or you're insulting somebody who's subject to the same number of mitzvahs that you are. So either way, that's problematic. So Amar Lei, his son, said to him, "Ve'ela maimavarach." So what should I say instead? Shelo asani eved. So you didn't make me a slave. So that becomes the third bracha that we referred to. Hainu isha. But 1 second, isn't that the same blessing as for a woman? No, it's not. Eved, as we turn to Mem Daled and Aleph Ziltve, an Eved is lower than a woman. And so, what do I mean by that? Take a look at Rashi, top Rashi. Afilu hachi mezuzah Eved yoter min ha'isha. A slave is lower than a woman, because while a woman does have to serve her husband, it's not a position of servitude, and so as a result, therefore it's it's better to be a woman than a slave. All right, I will note that there are various traditions with respect to what brachot people make. We actually dealt with in Rabbi Wendy Zieler's poetry class this morning. She actually went over this particular concept and noted the fact that there are some traditions that do focus on Sha'asa'ani Isha. In any event, that is the aside that we have in connection with these two statements of Rabbi Meir. We now go back to the discussion of tzitzit. So Tana Rabbanan. So that's that third word, third abbreviation, third statement on Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Tana Rabbanan. Chilazon zehu. So this is the chilazon. Okay, and so what do I mean by that? Gufa dom eliyam. So here, how do I know whether you have the right animal? That's chilazon. Well, its body it looks like the sea. Uvriyaso dom eladag, and its form looks like a fish. V'ola echad l'shivim shana, and it comes out of the water once every 70 years. Uvedamo tovim techeles, and its dye is used in techeles, into making the techeles dye. I'm sorry. You use its blood, uvedamo, tovim tcheles. That's what you use to dye tcheles strings. So lefikach damav yikarim, and that's why its blood is so expensive. And Rashi explains lefikach she'eno ola ela achas la'ayin shana damav yikarim. That the reason that its price is so high is because it only comes out of the water once every 70 years. And does not mean that you can only catch it every 70 years, but it becomes harder to catch during those other years. Okay, so Tanya, another brisa, Rabbi Nassan. So now we had mentioned before the reward associated with doing tzitzit, and we continue on in that vein. So Rabbi Nassan, ein lecha mitzvah kala shebetorah. Sheksuva b'Torah she'ein matan schara ba'olam hazeh ba'olam haba. There is no, every light mitzvah that's written in the Torah not only gives you a reward in this world, but also gives you a reward in the world to come. And any yodei kama, and you know what? Although we might be able to figure out how much the reward is in this world, you can't tell how much the reward is in the world to come. Mitzvah tzitzis, and you can learn this from the mitzvah of tzitzis. And here we're going to have one of the Gemaras that's on a top 50 list of Gemaras that one should be aware of. So keep this in mind, and the story is sufficiently memorable that I'm sure that anybody, once you hear it, you'll remember it. So there was a person who was very careful about the performance of the mitzvah tzitzis. Shama sheyesh zona bevrake hayam. I'm sorry, bekrake hayam. Shenotelas arba meos zuhuvim bischara, and he heard that there was a prostitute that was by one of the cities by the sea, and that she charged 400 golden pieces as her fee. So shiger la arba meos zuhuvim v'kava lazman. So he sent her the fee, and he created an appointment. Kishehigiyazmano bavi yashav ala Pesach. When it came for his time, he sat there at the door, waiting in the waiting room. Nichnasa shifchasa va'amrala, and so the prostitute servant came in and told her, "Oso adam sheshiger lech arba meo zuhuvim ba v'yoshev ela Pesach," that the person is waiting for you. So Amra hi yikanes. So she told him, "Let him come in." Nichnas, he came in. Hitzia lo sheva mitos. She prepared 7 beds for him. One higher than the other. So basically, imagine either a trundle bed or a bunk bed where you have ladders to go from one to the next. Sheish shel kesef, 6 were made out of silver, va'achas shel zav, and 1 was made out of gold. Uvein kol achas va'achas sulam shel kesef, and each one had, presumably the gold one was all the way at the top. Each one had a silver ladder to go up it. The Elyona shel zahav, and again, the top one was the golden ladder and the golden bed. But also the Yashva al Gabi Elyona, she went up and sat up on the top one, Kishehi Aruma, and she was undressed. The Avhu al Alishiv Arum Kenegda, and so he began to go up and sit opposite her without any clothing as well. Bo arba tzitzios v'tavchu al panav, and his 4 tzitzis then began to hit him in the face, whether it was while he was taking them off or the miraculous, however you want to understand it. Nishmat v'yashav lo al gabi karka, and as a result, he stopped. He realized he couldn't go any further. He couldn't do what he was doing, and so he sat down on the ground. So avhi nishmita v'yashva al gabi karka. So she was like, wow, I don't understand what's going on. I've never had this happen to me before. So she went and sat on the ground next to him. Amralo, and she said to him, Gapa shel Romi, the Gapa, the master of Rome. Now Rashi tells us that this was a phraseology of some kind of oath. Take a look at the last of the 4th wide line and first of the narrow lines in Rashi. Gapa shel Romi, Nishba'a b'chayei melech. Shehu Sarah Shel Romi. So she swore by the prince of Rome, by the king of Rome. Or Lishnachrina Avodazar, or this was some kind of Avodazar, but she makes an oath. She's like, I don't understand what's going on. So she'eni manichascha ad shetomarli ma mum re'ita bi. So she says, listen, tell me what I did wrong. What did I do that I make money through people wanting to be with me. So what did I do? So Amralo Havoda. So he responds with his own oath of referring to the avodah in the Beit Hamikdash. Shalora ite isha yafek kamosech. I've never seen someone as beautiful as you. Ela mitzvah achas tzivani Hashem Elokeinu. But God commanded us to do one mitzvah. V'tzitzis shma, and its name is tzitzis. Uksiv ba, and it says in that mitzvah, Ani Hashem Elokeichem shnei pamim. It says it 2 times. It says in the last verse in Parshas Shlach, it says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzesi eschem me'eretz Yisrael liyos lachem le'elokim Ani Hashem Elokeichem. So it begins and ends with the phrase Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Ani hu she'asid, and what is that double language telling us? Ani hu she'asid li para. I am the one who will cause you to pay, meaning that you're going to punish you. And I'm also going to be the one that gives you reward, meaning the double language refers to God being the source of both punishment and reward. Achshab nidmu alai ka'arba'a edim. And now these fringes are like to me, are to me like 4 witnesses. Amralo, so she said to him, Eini minichacha ad shetomer li ma shemcha u'ma shem yircha u'ma shem rabcha u'ma shem midrashcha she'ata lamad b'Torah. I need to understand more about you and your religion. What's your name? Where are you from? Who's your teacher? Where do you study? Where do you learn about what you've just told me? Kasav v'nasam biyada. So he wrote it all up and he gave it to her and he gave her the details. So after he left, she got up and she divided all of her possessions. Shlish l'malchus, 1/3 she gave to the government. And Rashi says, Shlish l'malchus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi, Shianichena lihit gayer, that they won't get upset, that they would let her convert. Ushlish la'aniyim, she gave 1/3 to the poor. Ushlish natla biyada, and 1/3 she took with her. Chutz mi osan matzaos, and that did not include the linens that were very fancy. Again, all these beds and linens that were very fancy that she had with her. Uvas lebeis midrasho shel Rabbi Chia, and she came to the base midrash of Rabbi Chia, and again. This man was a student of Rabbi Chia, and so that's how she got to him. Again, that's following the sort of the information on the piece of paper that he had written out. Amralo, so she said to him, Rabbi, my rabbi, tzavei alai vayasuni girores, tell me what to do and make me a convert. Amar la biti, she said, my daughter, Shema einayech nasat be'echa min hatalmidim. 1 second, are you interested in one of my students? Because if you are, maybe I shouldn't convert you because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Hotzia ksav miyada unisanalo. But she gave out the written note that was written, and she gave it to him. And Rashi says, Hotzi ksav miyada v'sapra lo, and she told him kol ha'me'ura, that the whole story shalashem shamayim he miskayeret, that in fact she's converting for positive reasons. Lefisha shama nes gadol shal chomer mitzvos, because she saw the great miracle that happened with respect to the tzitzit. Shetafu lo arba tzitzit al panav, tzitziot al panav, that the 4 fringes were hitting him in the face. So Amar La, so Rabbi Chia says back to her, L'chi u'zechi b'mikachech. She presumably after he has now finished the converting, process. So he says to her, go and collect your acquisition, meaning go and marry the student that inspired you to become Jewish. So osan matzah os shetzia lo be'isr hitzia lo beheter. So those linens that had originally been set up illegally, improperly, were now set up properly. Zemat, and the fact that that's what happened, zemat hanscharo ba'olam hazeh. So we see the reward that one has in this world. Ula olam haba, and as for the world to come, Eina yodea kama. Then I don't know how great it's going to be. But the bottom line is we see the tremendous reward associated with tzitzit. So finally, Rav Yehuda talis she'ula kol shloshim yom petura min hatzitzis. If you have a borrowed garment that has 30, that has four corners on it that you would require tzitzis ordinarily, you do not need to put tzitzis on it immediately. You have 30 days. Mikan ve'elech chayaves. But once you have 30 days at best, then you have an obligation to put tzitzis on it. Tanya Nami Hakim, we've got a brisa along the same lines. Hadar b'funduki b'Eretz Yisrael. If you live in an inn in Eretz Yisrael, v'hasocher bayis b'chutz la'aretz, or you rent a house outside of Israel, so kol shloshim yom pater min mezuzah. For 30 days, you're exempt from the rule of mezuzah. And again, it's important to note that it's renting that exempts you for 30 days, not buying. Mikan ve'elech chayav. But once you have, from that point on, you are obligated. Aval hasocher bayis be'Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, even once you rent it, ose mezuzah la'alter. You have to make the mezuzah right away. Mishum yishuv de Eretz Yisrael. Because of the idea of trying to encourage people to live in the land of Israel. Now, how does this cause anybody? So first of all, this shows that when you, again, other than because of the concept of living in Eretz Yisrael, ordinarily we would say that if you're renting something or borrowing something, you don't have an obligation to treat it as if it's your own until 30 days have passed. So that's how this brisa supports the concept with respect to tzitzit. But now let's address the last point of this brisa, which was that when you rent something in Israel, you should put mezuzah on immediately. So Rashi tells us, Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. It's in the narrow lines of Rashi. It's 17 lines down about. So Dela'achar Shekava Shuv. The Dela'achar Shekava, because once you put the mezuzahs up, once you affix them, Shuv Eino Notla Misham. You're not allowed to take them away from it. Afilu yotzi mimena. Even if you leave the house, you have to leave them attached. Kedamar b'perak hashova b'bab metzia, as we saw back in Bab Metzia, Daf Kuf Bet Amud Aleph. Hilkach b'kushi yatza mimena. So as a result, given the cost that's associated with mezuzot, it will discourage you from leaving your home. Mibnei Torah mezuzah, because of acheres, because of the trouble that you're going to have to go buy new mezuzot for wherever you go to live now. V'afilu yotzi mimena, and even if you do go out, yiskarenu acher mehera. Other people will want to rent your home, your kishayimitza ena mezumenes b'mezuzah b'nimtzas Eretz Yisrael miyosheves. And even if you do leave, other people will want to rent that place because it already has mezuzahs on it. And so as a result, it's going to encourage people to live in the land of Israel. Okay. So that is all from the beginning of our Mishnah, which referred to the Hilchos of Tzitzit. So we also said, where we said that the blue strings and the white strings are not ma'akev of one another. But now we also said at the end of the Mishnah, we said tefillah, and now we're at the two dots, 4 lines down in the wide lines near the bottom of Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, excuse me. Tefillah shel yad eina ma'akebes. The hand tefillin are not ma'akev, are not essential for you to use the tefillin on one's head, of the head tefillin. So Amar Rav Chisda, lo shana ela sheyesh lo. The only time that it's not ma'akev is if you actually have it. Meaning, if you don't have both a head tefillin and an arm tefillin, well, then you need to have both, or you shouldn't do either, is what Rav Chisda is saying. Aval ein lo, if you don't have ma'akeves, then they're essential. So amra lo, amart, is that true that you actually said this? So amra lo, lo, no, actually, I changed my mind. I didn't say it. I'm not saying it any, or at least I'm not saying it any longer. Okay. Elaman delesle trey mitzvos. But rather, what I mean to say is that the person's not going to have two mitzvahs. Chad mitzvah nami loli avid. But should he, if even if your person is not going to have two mitzvahs, should the person not at least do one mitzvah? In the end, yes, you should at least do one mitzvah because the mitzvah of tefillin shel rosh and tefillin shel yad are separate mitzvot. Umikara my supper. Well, why originally did he think that you should only do one if you own both and you just don't have the second one available, or maybe you have a bandage or something else that's preventing you from doing the second one? Gzeira Shema Yifsha, because we don't want the person to be negligent, as Rashi tells us. Mishum, my savar Shema Yivsha. So this is right after opposite the Hagos Tzadik Kuf. I amrinan de'ena ma'keves. If we were to say that there was no obligation, yifasha v'lo yikaneh ha'cheres. And now you only own one, you only own a shel yad, or you only own a shel rosh. Maybe you'll think, all right, well, one is good enough. And so as a result, I won't bother to get the second. And so as a result, that's why Rav Chisda originally thought to say, you know what, don't just do one. But in the end, he says, do one because it's better to do one mitzvah than no mitzvah. Okay, very important principle. Sometimes we always think, oh, we're not going to be able to do the whole thing. I'm only not going to help somebody completely. No, help, do what you can. The mitzvah, doing part of a mitzvah or one mitzvah is much more important than doing no mitzvot. And even if you don't do or are unable to do the multiple mitzvot, you at least get the reward associated with doing one. So Amar Rav Sheshis. Rav Sheshis now says again on this concept of not putting on tefillin. Kol she'eno meniach tefillin over b'shmona aseh. If you don't put on tefillin, you violate 8 different positive commandments. Rashi offers a couple of explanations for this, but I'll just do the first one. B'shmona aseh. Take a look right next Rashi. Arba parshios yesh behen. There are 4 parshios in the tefillin. V'kol chada, and in each one, kaimi trei aseh. Both of them have 2 different positive commandments because it says ukshartim laos v'hayulatotafos, meaning that it should be laos al yadecha, but and to totafos beinenecha. So the point is that double nature of commandment, meaning all 4 parshios reference the tefillin. So the reference to the head tefillin means that there are 4 positive references to the head tefillin, and the reference to the arm tefillin is the 4 positive references to the arm tefillin. So that therefore that's 8. 4 times 2 is 8. V'kol she'ein lo tzitzis bevigdo over b'chamisha aseh. And if you don't wear tzitzis, you violate 5 commandments. Last Rashi on the daf, the tzitzis hey v'asu. It's based on the commandment that you should make tzitzis. That's in Bamidbar Perek Tezvav Pasuk Lamed Chet. V'nasnu. That's the same pasuk that you should put it on the corners. V'haya, and that you should avaya lachem litzitzit. That's the next pasuk Lamed Tet. Uri item, and then you should see them. That's also pasuk Lamed Tet. And then over in Dvarim Perek Kafbet pasuk Yud Bet, it says Gedilim Taselach. So those are the 5 different references to positive commandments. Now, just to be clear, I am not at all saying that that in the count of 613, and they're not saying that in the count of 613, that's 5 different positive commandments. No, it's really just counted as 1 among the 613. But there are 5 and 8 Torah references that you are effectively undermining. The kol kohen she'eno ola l'duchan, and if the kohen doesn't get up to duchen, over b'shlosha asar, then you violated 3 different shlosha asay, shlosha asay, three different assays, three different positive commandments. And what are they? The Shita Mikubetzes tells us what they are. Take a look at the last of it's the second to last line in the Shita Mikubetzet. The beginning of the line is the Yud Bet. And then if you continue on in the line, She'ena Ola Laduchan Over Bishalosh. And what are they? Kotivarchu. This is how you should bless. Amor Lahem. You should say to them that Hare Shnayim. Those are the two in the first pasuk. Or in one of the introductory pasukim of Birkat Kohanim in Bamidbar Perek Vav pasuk Kaf Bet through Kaf Zayin, and then Visamo as Shemi, and then you should put my name on them, and so that is the third reference Havi Shalosha, and so that's three psukim. All right, and now back into the Gemara. Second to last line, middle of the line. Kol she'ein lo mezuzah b'pitcho. If you don't have a mezuzah on your door, over b'shnei asay, then you violated two. Uchsabtem, because both in the parsha of Shema and in the parsha of Vahayim Shemoah, it says that you should write it on the doorpost. So those two in Dvarim Perek Vav pasuk Tet and Dvarim Perek Yud Aleph pasuk Kaf, then you should also have you're violating two commandments. Lakish kol haminiach tefillin ma'arich yamim. Anybody who wears tefillin is going to extend the number of days in their life. Shene'amar adoshem aleihem yichyu. Those are the important words for the pasuk. This is a pasuk from Yeshaya, Perek Lamechet, pasuk Tes Zayin, that Hashem is on you, then you'll live. Ulkol bahen chayei, and therein is the life of chayei ruchi. Therein is the life of my spirit. B'sachal limeni habahachayeni. May you heal me and cure me. And so, as a result, the idea is, as Rashi says, top Rashi. Now we're on Mem Dalet Amabet. Hashem Aleichem. Otam shenosin aleim shem Hashem. Though b'tfilin yichyu, that those who put the name of God upon them with the tefillin are going to live, because it's important. Not only is the name of Hashem inside the tefillin, but even outside the tefillin. We have the shin on the shel rosh, the dalid on the back of the shel rosh, and then the yud on the as the knot attaching the tefillin of the shel yad to your arm. So that is the name of Hashem is literally upon you. So, all right, that brings us to the conclusion of the discussion of Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Tzitzis, and now we return back to the halachot of Menachot. So let us remind ourselves some of the halachot that we have been discussing. We've been talking about various mincha offerings, and in the last parak, we talked about various things that are essential to one another. In this parak, we're dealing with certain things that are not essential to one another. And so as a result, the Mishnah tells us, Hasolos v'hashemen ein ma'akven esayayin. When it comes to a minchas nesachim, this is discussed, it's actually juxtaposed with the mitzvah of tzitzis in Parsha Shlach, that when we talk about the minchas nesachim, these are the additional things that go with certain korbanot, and flour and oil and wine all go together with them. So if you have flour and oil, you don't need the wine, and the wine, you don't need the flour and oil, meaning you could do one without the other. So hamatanos so that velo hayayin ma'akvan, and so just as the flour and oil, do not are not necessary to have wine, meaning if you don't have flour and oil, you can still do the wine. So too, if you don't have the wine, you can still do the flour and the oil. Hamatanos sha'al hamizbeach, when it comes to putting the placements of blood on the altar, hachitzon, on the outer altar, ein ma'akvot zoetzo. We've seen that several times. You do not, the obligations do not limit, the one application does not prevent it from being effective. Let's take a look at Rashi, and we'll do all the Rashi on the Mishnah. Hasolas v'hashemen shel minchas nesachim. As I mentioned, this is for the mincha of nesachim. Ein ma'akven es hayayin. They are not essential to the wine. She'im hevi yayin below solas v'shemen minaskan. That even if you have wine without the solas and the shemen, you'll still do the nesicha. You'll still do the libations. Hamatanot, kagon arba matanot shel chatas. Imagine the 4 sin offering applications where you put some of the blood on each of the 4 horns that are in the corners of the outer altar. Ein ma'akvos zo et zo. They do not prevent each other. Shem lo nasan ela achas kiper. That is, if you did not put them, if you only put one, you still gain atonement. The person who brought the sacrifice still gains atonement. So now we're going to use this Mishnah because we've really dealt with these halachot sufficiently throughout Zvachim with respect to the latter one, and throughout, and there isn't much to say. I'll put it as that we're going to use this as an opportunity again to deal with some of the halachot associated with the minchas nesachim. So we have a brisa, Tana Rabbanan, uminchasam v'niskehem. You have the mincha and the libations. So have mincha v'achar kach have nesachim. So that teaches that first you bring the mincha and then you bring the libations. Rebbe Omer zebach unsachim. No, there's a different order. First you have the sacrifice and then you have the nesachim. The nesachim go with the sacrifice, and therefore the nesachim go before the libations. Have zevach v'achar kach have nesachim, and then you bring the mincha. So there are 2 different orders. One says sacrifice mincha nesachim, and the other one says no, sacrifice nesachim mincha. So the Rebbe Nami. So 1 second though, each of them have to now deal with the verse cited by the other. Now, just because this is going to get a little confusing, I will note that in the end, even though they cited those verses in this brisa, in the end, both Rebbe and the Tanakama are going to rely on other things, and these are just allusions, and because these psukim are going to be teaching us other things, not the prioritization of which you bring first, the mincha or the nesachim, after you bring, when you're talking about a minchas nesachim of a korban. So Rebbe Nami hakasiv uminchasam v'niskehem. 1 second, Rebbe also has the pasuk uminchasam v'niskehem, meaning we all have that pasuk. So what does he do with it? That the idea of mincha and nisachim, it means it's telling us that those can be brought separately, meaning even at night, and they can be separately even the next day. And Rashi points out, if you brought the sacrifice today, yachola hakriv nisachav lemachar, you can bring the libations tomorrow. Ubilvad shelo yikadshu bekli me'etmol. As long as today, on the previous day, you did not already, meaning the day that you offer the sacrifice, you did not already sanctify them in a vessel. Because if you did, well then overnight will cause them to become invalid. As we have not yet learned, but in this round of the Daf Yomi, but in Maseches Meila, Daf Terem and Aleph, Kadshu Bekli, Huksharu Lifsel, B'Tvul Yom, U'Mechusar B'Kaparim, U'Belina. That when you have something that has been sanctified in a vessel for the Minchas Nesachim, well then it is prepared, it's already capable of becoming tamei and invalid if a tvul yom, somebody who went to the mikvah already, but it's not yet nightfall, and therefore they're not completely tahor, u'mechosar kaporim, or somebody who not only did it already night come, but it's the next day, and they are just not fully tahor because they haven't brought the sacrifice the next day yet, and they touch it, that will also cause it to be invalid. Ubelina. And if it stays overnight, it will become invalid. So in all three cases, but most importantly for our context, the lina will make it invalid. So Rashi's highlighting that when we say you can do it even the next day, it means as long as it was not sanctified, the nesachim and the mincha were not sanctified in a vessel on the prior day. For Rabbanan Nami, Haksiv Zevach Nusachim. So now, and then we have the pasuk of Zevach Nusachim that was used by Rebbe. What do the Tanakama do with that? What do the rabbis do with that? So Hahumi Boile, look at the Zeiri. They need it for what Zeiri says. The Amr Zeiri Ein Nisachim Miskadshin Ela B'Shchitas HaZevach. That Nisachim only become sanctified through the slaughtering of the sacrifice. Meaning that, let's take a look at Rashi. Ein HaNisachim, this is Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines. Ein HaNisachim Haban Im HaZevach. When you have the libations that are supposed to go with the sacrifice, they are not going to be sanctified. The kolzban shelo nishchat hazevach, as long as you haven't slaughtered the animal. Afal pisha hefrishan, even though you separated the oil and the wine l'shem zevach for this sacrifice, and in order for it to be nesachim, zeh yachol lishnosan, the owner has the ability to change l'shem zevach acher and say, you know what, I'm going to use it for a different sacrifice. Aval achar shchita, once the animal has been slaughtered, then it's too late. You can no longer change them to be for another sacrifice. Okay, so back into the Gemara. So now we have, so this is, as I noted before, we have now two lessons from the psukim that the Tanakama and Rebbe cited. We have a lesson about being able to bring the mincha at night and the next day, and we have a lesson about being able to use the nesachim for a different sacrifice until the animal until the first animal is sacrificed, and then you have to use it for that sacrifice. And so v'Rebbe nami mi boy leila kedaziri, v'Rabbanan nami mi boy lehu leminchasam v'niskehem b'layla u'minchasam v'niskehem afilu l'machar. Both of them both Rebbe and the rabbis need to learn the lessons that a Rebbe and the rabbis learn from the psukim that the other one is citing. So Ella hainu taimayo d'Rabbanan. So you know what? Again, we're going to change the reasoning. It is not based on the psukim that we cited originally of minchasam v'niskehem and zevach u'nsachim, but rather diksiv ola u'mincha. Here's the explanation. The Torah says that you need to bring the ola and the mincha, and this, and so as a result, the point is that what's the idea? Take a look at Rashi. Ola umincha 3, 6, 10 lines up in the Rashi. Ola mincha mashma achar haola miyad yakriv mincha. So the reason that you're supposed to bring the mincha immediately after the ola is because you have these two words juxtaposed to one another. So so therefore the nesachim go after the mincha. So it goes ola mincha nesachim. So that's the explanation of the rabbis. Rebbe nami haksiv olo mincha. But 1 second, according to Rebbe, they also have that same verse. Why not also say therefore that Rebbe would agree with them? Ella No, really, when you have when the nesachim and the mincha are brought on the day that you brought the sacrifice, everybody agrees on the order. The mincha va'achar kach nesachim, that you first bring the mincha and then the nesachim. V'tahaksiv ola umincha, because the Torah says ola umincha. Ki pligi, where is the disagreement between the Tanakama and Rebbe? B'viyin b'fnei atzman, when they are brought even the next day or several days later, because we saw that you could bring them even 10 days later. So Rabbanan Savrei Midivani Mazevach Mincha Va'achar Kach Nesachim. Since the rabbis say that, well, once we're going to tell you that when you bring it with the korban, you're going to bring the mincha first and then the nesachim. So too, you should always bring the mincha and then the nesachim. Bifnei atzman nami. We're going to say the same thing when you bring the mincha and the nesachim on their own. Mincha va'akar kach nesachim. You bring the mincha and then you bring the nesachim. V'Rebbe hasam hu da'idi It's only there in that case where there's eating that's involved. That's why you're going to bring the mincha before the nesachim, because the nesachim just get poured on the mizbeach. There is no eating that's associated with them. So once we're doing a sacrifice that involves eating, so then we'll do the mincha that involves eating. But when you're not doing it, so then we'll do it in a different order. Gamar la lakula milsa da'achila. We're going to finish everything that has to do with eating. And so, both the mincha, and when we say eaten, we don't necessarily mean eaten by a human. The burning on the mizbeach is also called eaten, but the nesachim is a drink. And so as a result, that is not considered eaten. Aval bifnei atzman. If you're bringing the mincha with the nesachim on their own, nesachim adife hoel demis amra shira alayhu. No, nesachim are better. And they're because we say shira about them. So Rashi tells us, what is that referring to, that we say shira? So ala nesachim omrim shira halaviyim. The Leviim, when the Kohanim are bringing the nesachim, they sing. And how do I know that? Because Meseches Erechim beperak ein ne'archin daf yud aleph amud aleph, it tells us that the Leviim would sing song over them. Now Tosos points out. Let's take a look at the Tosos. It's the first Tosos in the widest lines of Tosos. Keva de misamra shira alayhu perish lahaviam im hazevach. That when that we got to be clear that when do they sing song? When the nesachim are brought with a korban, so then the Leviim are going to sing. Abavafnei atzmo, when the nesachim are brought on their own, bayahi perek ein narchin. It's actually a question as to whether or not the Leviim are supposed to sing in that context. Umikomakom, but nonetheless. Even though when they're brought separately, it's a question whether or not there's singing that's involved. Af belav zevach adife, but even when there's no korban that's brought with them, so there's only a question as to whether the Leviim are supposed to sing. The bringing of the nesachim, of the libations, is better, is stronger, is more important, and therefore going to be done first. Kevin shahayu ru'uyin l'shira ulaba imazevach, because it's fit for singing. Meaning, if these libations had been brought with the korban, well, then you would be doing singing. And so, as a result, that singing potential associated with the nesachim tells, according to Rebbe, that we should put the libations first. Okay, last little bit, and then we'll close for the day. Hamatanos sha'al mizbeach hachitzon. This is the last bit of our Mishnah. It said that the applications on the outer altar are not essential to one another. Tanu Rabbanan, minayin l'chol hanitanin ala mizbeach hachitzon shenasana b'matana achas shekiper. How do I know that one application of blood is sufficient for atonement? Shneamar v'dam zivachecha yishafech al mizbach Hashem Elokecha. The blood of your offerings shall be poured upon the altar of Hashem your God. And so, if we take a look at Rashi, Yishafech, so Yishafech shvicha achas. It's a single pouring. That's being referenced, and so as a result, a single pouring implies one application, and therefore that is why. If even though technically there is a requirement, there is a mitzvah to make 4 applications when you have a korban chatas, if you make one application, it is going to be sufficient for the person who brings it to receive atonement. That brings us to the next Mishnah, and so we will pick up, God willing, from there tomorrow. Again, looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a wonderful day.